In June 1956, on a singing tour in the Bahamas, 20-year-old student Lauren Cunningham had a vision from God. He saw his wall transform into a world map with each continent. He saw waves repeatedly crashing over those continents, eventually covering them. And this picture then transformed, and the waves became young people, his age or younger, who were speaking on every street corner in cafes, sharing the good news about Jesus to everyone in every nation of the world. This was a novel concept in the 50s. There were not young people out in missions, and they weren't necessarily welcome, as church leaders told Lauren all the inherent problems in his plan. The last thing they needed was a bunch of thrill-seeking kids going and complicating the worthwhile job that the real missionaries were trying to do. My name is Morrison, a new leader in YWAM, and here's my attempt at sharing the story of the YWAM movement. So this vision never left Lauren. Over the next years, God gave him more of the details how to start. It was to be for young people after high school to go and gain a sense of purpose. It was for Christians of all denominations. And so Lauren founded Youth with a Mission. And in the next little while, he also met his wife, Darlene, and they are looked at today as the co-founders of YWAM. Over the next years, YWAM had just a handful of staff, and the early days were spent organizing short summer outreaches for hundreds of volunteers. On one of these trips, Lauren met a young, passionate Pacific Islander, and there Lauren started to realize that these people were really raw, and he started seeing the need for foundational training in the Bible, in prayer, in upright living. In other words, discipleship. And that's when God gave Lauren the equivalent of a billboard in guidance. It came in two parts. The first part was God speaking to Lauren as he was sick in bed with a fever. He describes himself nursing his aches, and then a thought came: you are to open a school, and this school should be called the School of Evangelism, and it should be in Switzerland. And so Lauren and Darlene, they booked plane tickets to Switzerland with the little money they had. And just a couple days before their departure, the next part of this billboard guidance came, and it was in the form of a friend of Lauren's father who invited him for breakfast and said, "Lauren, I have had the vision of a school in Switzerland, and it should have an international student body and traveling guest speakers. God told me that you are the one who needs to start this, and I'm not to be a part of it, also not a teacher, but my part is to be a channel to get this message to you." So that's how YWAM bought a hotel in Lausanne, Switzerland, and began running their first schools of evangelism. I've heard varying reports of how many staff there are now worldwide, and most go to about 20,000 staff. And it's hard to get a real number, accurate number, because of our movement nature. We're not a centralized organization, we're a movement. And the challenge that YWAMers face today is to remain a movement and not become a monument where we're set in our ways, overly concerned with preserving our image, but remain a movement that is dependent on innovative vision from God to transform the world with his love, creativity, justice, and mercy. A movement of people who are willing to put their safety, reputation, lives on the line when God tells them to go. In my early steps as a Christ follower, the Apostle Paul was my biggest inspiration. I could read how he moved things on such a huge scale for the kingdom together with God. I saw that his lifestyle was forcing him to be totally reliant on God, and he was willing to give his whole life for his call. In YWAM, I found a movement of people who choose to go like Paul, with the same fervor, commitment, thoughtfulness, and integrity. YWAM's 8th foundational value, to be international and interdenominational, it also echoes this picture of the early church from Acts, where there was a fellowship of believers who declared Jesus as Lord and Christ from all nations. So what lesson do I take from this? Vulnerability. To be vulnerable totally towards God, your ministry partners, and the ones you're serving. Where would YWAM be today if our early leaders hadn't allowed God to convict and prune them, if they hadn't confessed their sins and errors as a lifestyle, if they hadn't responded in obedience when God brought them correction in whatever form. So this is the standard that has been set for me as a new leader in YWAM. And I hope that I will act the same as they did.